Today, we're bringing you some highly important skateboard information. I can honestly tell you, there's no better feeling than skating down the street, wind in your hair, and popping a little Ollie on the way to your local coffee shop. But it turns out that no matter how many tutorials us YouTubers make about Ollies, beginners always seem to find new ways to, let's say, struggle. Whether you're in a bustling city or your own quiet suburban driveway, the odds are you're falling victim to this widespread issue: terrible Ollies. That's right, baby. Skate IQ Guy is bringing you back to the basics, and we're gonna figure out exactly why your Ollies are the way that they are and make them not like that anymore. So here are the 8 most common issues you'll see when you're trying to learn Ollies. The first issue just has to do with not being able to balance properly while you're squatted, loading the board into the ground, getting ready to explode up in the air. So there's a bunch of reasons that you might be falling off toe side or heel side. Number 1 is just gonna come down to your foot position. Like, there's no reason not to have an all-star setup. So whenever I'm looking at a beginner or even some intermediate skaters trying to get their Ollies better, we have to start with foot position, okay? Some huge red flags. The toes hanging off of the board. Whenever you see the toes hanging off, you pretty much know that you're gonna be too much on your heels and you won't have the ability to really set up over the balls of your feet like you need to. As a general guideline, we wanna turn our front foot so it's facing a little bit forward. We wanna set it a couple of inches below the top bolts. Anywhere between like 2 and 5 inches is probably fine. We wanna set it up so you can balance on the ball of your front foot without turning too much to the left or the toe side. So that front foot's gonna be sitting in like truly the center of the board in every way, between the nose and tail and between the left and right rail. So you can stand on that ball of your foot and be able to go in a straight line. The importance of being able to skate in a straight line while your Ollies are being loaded up cannot be overstated, and it's probably one of the least thought about things when you're new to skating. Every time you start turning accidentally, you are literally losing pop and you're literally losing the ability to control your board in the air. Now that we have our front foot position dialed, let's talk about where our back foot goes. Your feet always work together. Every time you make an adjustment to your front foot, you're gonna have to make an adjustment to your back foot that complements your stance. So what I mean is, if your front foot is truly in the center of your board and you're not turning at all, you can put your back foot in the center as well. Now both of your feet are pushing directly down on top of your board and you're not dealing with any turning. If you feel more comfortable with your front foot more towards the toe side, if you feel like that gives you better balance, you might have to sit your back foot a little more off of the heel side so you can counter the turns that each foot is making. So in this setup, I can turn towards my toe side with my front foot and I can turn towards my heel side with my back foot. And this gives me kind of that ability to counter those rotations. It's balanced on the way down, lets everything pop up. You really only start running into issues if both of your feet are on the same side. You can even see the board doesn't want to react off the ground the same if everything is being loaded into one rail or the other. Any way you can get that board to stay flat, you can skate in a straight line, you can really load it up by pushing your feet into it, you're in good shape. Once you get your foot position dialed, we can talk about upper body control. Poor upper body control plagues skaters all over because we're not really taught how to use our upper body to balance. Really, I mean, really no one ever talks about it. I learned it from getting coaching in other sports, not even skateboarding. What's gonna happen is as you bend down, if you keep your upper body sitting straight up, this is gonna tend to pull you backwards. It's gonna tend to pull you towards your heel side. Then you feel that and your instincts kick in, so you start bending down like this, because then that keeps you over the front of your board, right? And you see so many people trying to ollie like that, or pump, or carve, and it's just the wrong way to go about it. We rarely will do anything in this life in this position. So what I want you to do is get comfortable hinging forward at your hips and dropping your hips down towards the ground. This is a very comfortable position, right? I can put my shoulders pretty much over my feet. My shoulders are pretty much over my toes. My hips sit back and I can get as low as I want and I can explode up into the air from there, right? It's this combination where when you bend down, you hinge forward. This is really something you're gonna have to practice until it's intuitive. And it's a tool you're gonna use in both the loading phase while you're getting ready to jump and for your landings. The last issue in this section is gonna be over squatting. So this is another very big beginner issue. And I also attribute this to confidence and strength, actually, because a lot of times when you know you wanna pick that board high up into the air, you think that just like getting lower and lower is setting you up to do the biggest ollie ever. But really there's a point of diminishing returns. So a good way to go about this, maybe just pick something average height, like the height of this ledge, maybe a curb. Set your camera up on the side and just jump onto it and take a screenshot at the bottom of your squat. Okay, I don't know exactly where mine is off the top of my head. I'd have to look at what I did. Take that squat, go film yourself try an ollie, and make sure they're at least similar. Because what happens is you jump onto a ledge, and that's fine, and then you get on your board to do an ollie, and it starts looking like completely different. Remember, we're just jumping, right? If you want to do an ollie 8 inches high, 12 inches high, that doesn't take any more effort as far as the jump is concerned of just jumping that high. Once you connect your foot position to your squat and hinge, and you make sure you're squatting the right depth, and then you're pushing against the ground instead of leaning up out of it and trying to pull everything off of the ground, you should have pretty good balance at the bottom of your squat. You can seriously just test this. If you want a drill for section 1, just hop on your board, take a squat, and adjust the depth of your squat and how much your upper body is moving, and also adjust your foot position, and just hang out here for a while until you really feel like you can hold that board flat. Should be a piece of cake. Number 2, trapping the tail to the ground when you're trying to ollie. After you get your squat down, you will inevitably come across this issue at some point in your life. There's nobody who has learned ollies that skips the stage where they trap the tail on the ground. Let's just break this down logically. First, I'm gonna relate to you guys, and then we're gonna delete that frame of mind and replace it with something else. It might feel normal to try and pick the board up off of the ground by feeling your back foot going down into the ground and then trying to grab the board and jump from there. But it does not work. All right, it does not work. You hear all of these tutorials talking about lifting and sliding and all this stuff. There are a lot of different ways to think about ollies. after they get in the air, the way you maneuver the board, the way you tweak it and bone it. There are a lot of ways to go about that, but it doesn't matter if you're trapping the tail to the ground. So I think this is one of the most important parts, because once you can get the board to bounce, now at least you can enter the conversations. Oh, I think you should do this. I think I like doing more of this motion. I like doing more of this motion. If you're trapping the tail to the ground, you're not even in the conversation. So let's figure out how to get this thing bouncing up into the air, and then we can do ollies. There's two main reasons that it gets trapped to the ground. First one is artificially lifting the nose in the air. And the second one is squatting too much, which just leads us back to the first one. What I mean by artificially lifting the nose into the air, this took me a while to understand, actually. Once I'm standing on the board with my back foot on the tail, it does not matter how much I lift my front foot up. This board is glued to my front foot. I mean, seriously, grab your skateboard right now, go stand on it, and try to take your front foot off. It's not happening. It's not happening, okay? So with that in mind, most people start lifting their front leg in the air well before they're ready to jump. So now the tail is on the ground, and then that jump is finished. So we want to get further along in the jump before we lift the nose up into the air, before we lift our front foot. That first position is the squat, and that second position is the extension. And what that means is you start extending up off of the board, feel your heels start to rise, and then you start bringing that front foot up into the air. And even in that position, my instincts start kicking in. I know that once I'm up here, I can pop an ollie pretty easily. The reason you want to start extending up into the air before that nose comes up is so you're leaving the board while your nose is like this high. Because your back toe is gonna kind of extend down into the ground pretty naturally, and you want to give that tail space to bounce back up in the air. Your back foot never touches the ground, so you're kind of throwing the tail at the ground and then it's chasing you up. So if you're trying to jump with bent legs, it's pretty much guaranteed that you're gonna end up trapping it just like that. Because it's kind of like a rocking motion where you're pushing and pulling, and you're trying to pull that board in the air instead of just jumping off of it and letting that tail bounce underneath you. We're going back to screenshots, okay? Take a screenshot at the bottom of your squat, make sure it looks like your jump. I'm gonna do an ollie and take a screenshot and pause it in the last frame before the front wheels come up into the air. Okay, there should be a frame where those front wheels are still on the ground and then they come up. I assume my legs will be like about this straight, but I'll have the energy like I'm leaving the board, right? I'm waiting to start to feel my weight go up into the air, and then those front wheels come up as that jump happens, okay? A lot of your guys' screenshots at home are gonna be a lot lower. You're gonna get down, and then that screenshot will be like right here, and then those wheels will come up, and you'll see this back leg extending down into the ground and trapping everything and not letting it bounce. The second piece of this section is pretty much exactly the same as the first. Just don't squat too much. If you squat more, then you just have to extend for longer before you initiate the ollie, which makes timing a little bit harder, makes you have more patience, balance, strength, all these things. There really are a lot of diminishing returns as you start squatting too much. Number 3, leaning back when you pop. If you've done any other sport, besides skateboarding. A lot of skaters have, a lot of skaters haven't. So we'll just build this theory up from scratch for everyone who didn't grow up, you know, doing those like classic team sports. Whenever you're throwing something, whether it be a punch or a ball, or you're shooting a basketball, or you're swinging a golf club, the first thing that happens is we find our balance and we get our power from the ground. You know you're starting to get outside of your range when you start using your whole body and throwing everything around to try to get a little bit more power. Usually that just means hit the gym, get your fundamentals better, get some more ground power, get your balance, learn how the actual system works, and stop throwing your body around randomly. It's the same thing for a jump. If you watch the guys doing like the high jump world records, or even doing the things, they're not like trying to throw themselves in a super unstructured fashion. So when you're jumping to do your Ollie, balance should be the #1 priority. Balance just means that you're not moving back and forth and you're not moving left and right, okay? If your balance is good before you squat, you should maintain good balance as you squat. If your balance is good in your squat, you should maintain good balance through your extension. If you have good balance in your extension, you should have good balance in the air, right? I see so many people trying to prioritize height or the feeling of power over balance. And it turns into a very chaotic and a little bit of a desperate attempt to get the board in the air, where if you lean into structure and strength and balance a little more, yes, everything will feel smaller and a little more compact. But as you practice that, you'll find that you have a lot more power and consistency going about it that way, opposed to leaning to try to get that little bit extra height. As we can see, skaters are having an extremely difficult time out there. It seems like the only way to really progress is to spend another 100 hours on your skateboard without worrying about tricks. I mean, seriously, worrying about your Ollies before you feel comfortable skating around town, it's like selling your car for gas money. Use your time to get comfortable on your board, and then spend the end of your session and try 20 to 50 Ollies. This leads us straight into point number 4. Board shooting backwards when you pop. The reason the number 3 leads to number 4 is this happens enough times, what are you gonna do? You're gonna start leaning back over it and trying to jump from there. Okay, this might put you in a position where you're sitting on the back of the board, makes you wanna loop out. I've seen it all too many times, so we're not gonna do that. What we're gonna do, if your board is shooting backwards as you're popping, is we're gonna learn how to shift that board forward underneath us, so it's just sitting more towards the direction that we're going relative to our body. We covered this point super in depth in our most important trick in skateboarding video. That link is in the description. If you're really curious on how you can use manuals to practice your Ollies, please go check that out. And while you're down there, make sure you subscribe to the channel. So what we're gonna do is try and move our back trucks a little bit forward relative to our head, okay? So most beginners, honestly most skaters in general, skate pretty far forward over their board, right? So if you're all the way up here and you lift the nose up, your board's gonna wanna roll backwards because those back wheels are sitting behind you. So one easy adjustment you can make is just shift your hips backward over your tail. You can keep your upper body forward. You'll feel a little bit more weight on your back foot. And then you can just kind of extend the board a little bit forward. This will make it so you can lift the nose without your board rolling backwards. And then that will make it so when you ollie, it doesn't want to roll backwards underneath you. This is a very, very important tip, and it's probably the most under-taught skill in all of skateboarding. I don't say that lightly. I've never heard a single other person talk about board position underneath you while you're skating, which is absolutely crazy to me because you get all your power from the ground. So if you're standing on your board in a way where you can't get power from the ground, what are you really accomplishing? Moving my skateboard a little bit forward in my stance has been the single biggest change I made in the last 8-9 years. And the best part is, you can practice it from day one. You don't need to wait to have 15 years of experience to start shifting where that board is sitting underneath you. That is such a huge part of the battle of learning all these tricks, is just getting the board to take off the right way. And to get it to take off the right way, you have to load it the right way. So if you get an in-depth understanding of how to shift that board around properly, how to do manuals, and how to get that tail to bounce into the ground, you've like done a lot of the hard work already. If that takes you 100, 200, 300 hours to figure out, that's fine. Like, get that out of the way now. So then kickflips and tray flips and 180s and 360s and that stuff is just gonna be available when you're ready for it. Number 5, the 5th issue we'll see with ollies. This is one of the only issues that we'll see that isn't necessarily like a positioning issue or a strategy issue or anything like that. This one is a little bit more conceptual because I see all the time someone at skater A has pretty good stationary ollies. Then they start moving and they look like they've never done it before. And I'm like, what is going on? Why is this happening? So let's just talk about ollies while moving as a concept, as a whole. We're gonna start with how you are viewing the actual technique of the ollie. It doesn't change when you're moving. So when you do an ollie, your nose comes up and backwards a little bit, your front foot hooks to the nose, you pick the tail up, right? A lot of people do this naturally because they practice ollies while stationary a lot. It's easy to visualize compared to moving, and you don't have this big distraction of clearing your back trucks over the crack or up the manual pad. So you're not concerned with forward distance at all. So that ollie happens directly under you really nicely. But then you start moving and you start visualizing the ollie more out there, and you start picking up the nose way more in front of you. You start chasing it a little bit more and you start pushing your back foot forward. So let's just remember that even though we're moving as far as our eyes are concerned, and we can feel the wind on your body and stuff is coming at you, this ollie still happens completely underneath you, and you have to be comfortable bringing your nose up and into you and then your tail up and under you. With that motion, you'll be able to bring the board forward. You'll be able to bring it with you. The more you're concerned about stretching your feet out in front of you to get the board to cover distance rather than focusing on height, you're gonna be in trouble. So if you want to cover more distance or ollie onto things, you're gonna let the speed do the work of the distance, and you're just gonna focus on the height of your ollie and pretend like you're standing still. I'm gonna lay out some signs that it's happening to you. So if this is happening to you, start treating them a little bit more like you're standing still, okay? When you do an ollie while you're standing still, you can bring your tail into the air, and then all of a sudden you try to ollie onto a manual pad and that happens. Your back trucks are running into the bottom of the manual pad, and then it's coming up. Okay, the second sign it's happening to you, you lose control of your feet. Okay, you ollie onto a manual pad, and all of a sudden your board starts flipping, or you put your foot down and it's not on your board or whatever, and that doesn't happen on the ground when you're standing still. You're trying to throw everything too far forward. If you're hanging up, if you're pushing your front foot down into the thing that you're trying to land on, you're pushing your board forward, okay? A lot of the signs just mean that you're not treating it like you're standing still and you're getting a little bit addicted to what's in front of you, and you should focus on what's under you. Unfortunately, a bar. I'm not gonna lie, this one's a tough cookie to crack. How does that saying work? Tough nut to crack? I'm not gonna lie, man, this one's a tough cookie to crack. A lot of issues with boards turning. I get messages every single day on Instagram and in our online community for video reviews where the board is just turning front side. Brock, our videographer, says he's seen a lot of issues where boards turning backside. So this thing is moving all over the place under us, left and right, and what is going on? And to be honest, the thing I can focus most on is fundamentals of structured setup, good extension, tail bouncing into the ground without a bunch of back foot pressure. I know that when I was working on switch ollies a few days ago, one turned frontside on me, like without trying to. And I immediately couldn't figure out what happened. But I know when I started extending and jumping and lightened up my front foot in the air, it got better. So all I want to do is tell you to focus on your feet more than your skateboard. It's a lot easier to think about your own body than it is to think about what your skateboard is doing. So I don't care if your skateboard turns frontside. You keep your feet under control, okay? What that's gonna do is if you know you're not just chasing your board around, you know you're not just like turning however your board turns, you're gonna put your foot somewhere and you better find a way to bring your board with you. What that's gonna do is it should help your instincts kick in to where when you set up, maybe you drop your front foot a little bit back towards like the heel side rail. So when it's in the air, you can push on your nose backside to keep the board straight. Maybe you set up your hips a little bit different so you can start to mitigate some of this rotation that's happening from the ground, right? Ultimately, I can give you each piece of the fundamentals, but you're gonna have to fine tune your adjustments and read and react when things start going wrong, okay? The board turning is not the problem. Your setup, your foot position, maybe you're trapping the tail to the ground, maybe you're falling off of it, maybe you're not extending enough, maybe your front foot's going too much into the nose at takeoff, maybe you're slamming your feet into the ground. We'll cover some of those topics very soon, but I just wanna let you know, like, if you're having an obvious problem like the board rotating, break down each step and figure out where your ollie is breaking down, and then see, when you fix that, see if that fixes the symptom of your board rotating. The last thing I want to cover when it comes to ollies while moving is just the fear. Skateboarding is terrifying and it's a bit dangerous, and ollies are jumping. You're all the way up here and technology is really good, so those bearings are rolling fast. Get comfortable with speed, with bailing, with turns and recovering and manuals and all these things till your fear of the ollie starts to dissipate before you even really practice it a ton. The biggest hurdle when coaching a student is getting them to trust me and to trust themselves. Through the camera, to you viewers at home, that's even harder to do because I can't literally hold your hands and tell you exactly when you're doing something right or wrong, or say, hey, I see a little bit of an issue with this. Be careful of that, because when you ollie really high, your landing might be a little bit funny. You're not gonna have those in-depth insights every second of every day. So what you're gonna have to do is over practice the fundamentals and kill your fear through repetition and learn how to bail from every position so the board isn't just gonna catch on fire and fly out and throw you on the ground. What you wanna do is be able to make changes to your ollies without going blind from fear when you're squatting to set up, all right? Usually everything will feel fine, then you feel a little bit of speed, and your brain gets a little loud, and you get some tunnel vision, and then you start thinking about hitting your hip, and then you're just like, I just gotta get it over with, and you're like, it turned again, what am I doing wrong? Slow down, seriously break your practice up over weeks or months, not into minutes and hours, okay? The more comfortable you are, the more fundamental skill you have, the easier once you learn how to bail and save tricks, your life will get a lot easier and you'll be able to progress faster on the back end. So have fun, don't get hurt, more time on the board is better. Revisit this video when you're ready, you'll be just fine. Number 6, bouncing and leveling the board out. This is an advanced portion of the ollie. If you're here, congratulations, because you can ollie already. It's really easy to be hard on yourself and not appreciate your ollies where they are, because maybe your back trucks stay low, maybe you feel like you can't pick up the tail. No stress in that. You're off of the ground and you can bounce your tail into the ground and land them consistently. That is wonderful. Enjoy it, practice it a ton, have fun with the skill you have now. But for those of you who wanna ollie like 15 feet high, and be able to pick your tail up into the air, you're gonna need some of these tips. So, first thing is, how much patience you need whenever you're popping is crazy. Blows my mind every single day. The more patient I am, the better off. Meaning, after I pop, if I can just wait and not get in the way of the board and just let it keep coming up and let that nose really attach itself to my front foot, the better off I am. Even after I feel the nose, if I take that quarter of a second and just slowly nudge that nose up into the air, trying to bring the tail up, the better off I am. The more I start pushing and getting fast, the worse everything goes. And it's for me, it's on kick flips and backside flips and switch flips and things like that. My ollies I'm pretty comfortable with, but I can easily lose the nose and start over flicking and flicking too fast and losing accuracy and all these things. So logically, let's just break down how it works, because this is really important. After you pop, there is no way that our foot on top of the board is gonna help the board come up into the air. All we're doing is trying to get out of the way of the skateboard and let it rise. Since we're pushing on the tail, that nose will come up like so. Get out of the way, right? So what we have to do is take our front foot and find the nose up here to flatten out the tail. I want you to do this a few times. Practice ollies like that, and you can even mimic your front foot with your hand by pushing. If you push down at the ground, you'll start to realize there's no way to bring the tail into the air. So we get up, we wait, and we slowly bring that tail into the air by drawing a raindrop or a balloon with our front foot, right? Brock, if you could follow my front foot with a line, we'll go frame by frame. It's gonna be something like this, okay? Comes up and to the inside, up and over the top, and then back into position. Most people mess up that top part. They have a pretty good takeoff, their landing goes this way, right? Most people take off pretty intuitively, and then they just push there. So it's like, I could probably do a better switch because I don't have as much muscle memory. Yeah, that was way better. Most of the ollie is solved by just taking that path, right? Because then you can bounce the board, find the nose, pick up the tail, push it back down. It really is that simple, but it takes more patience and more discipline in your takeoff motion and at the top than you could ever imagine. You'll have to really drill that motion into your head, how slow it is, and how you gotta really feel the board at the top. You're not skipping any stage at all. Level 7. This one is just lifting your back leg. And I'm not convinced that it's purely a strength issue. Like hip strength, the actual act of lifting up your leg. I believe some of it is a strength issue, but I don't think all of it is. Generally, it doesn't feel good to have a lot of space between your back foot and your tail. And when you're first learning ollies, it makes more sense to chase your tail to the ground by keeping your back foot very low and looking for your board. And if you start picking your back foot up a lot, you're gonna start having a lot of space between you and your board. You say that doesn't look or feel right, so let's just keep that leg straight and we'll deal with it later. I'm actually on the other side of the fence. I think you should lean into having a lot of space between your back foot and your tail, because at least the day you learn how to close that gap at the top, you can ollie that high. If your feet are low to the ground, there is no way you can ollie higher than your feet. If you pick your feet up and you don't know how to bring your board there, that's fine, because you can just learn how to bring your board. Distance between your back foot and the tail is not an issue at all. Just apply what we learned on number 6 with that footpath, drawing that raindrop or that balloon to pick up the tail. Okay, so I'm just gonna add a little bonus tip in here because I just thought about it. Most people think that the ollie is like jump, slide, push. But really, it is jump, lift, lift, weight. And your back foot just jumps, lifts. All right, there is so much lifting of the feet and not that much lifting of the board, okay? Your board bounces and your feet lift, and you learn how to bring that tail up and to adjust the nose. Right now, I think a lot of people are thinking about it like lift the board and keep your feet low, which logically, after watching that video, you know that probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Number 8 is gonna be extending your legs into the ground and landing on a pair of stilts, basically, landing with straight legs. So at your ollie's current height, wherever it is right now, you can float a little bit longer. I truly believe that. I think you're stealing a little bit of height away from yourself just by searching for the ground. Once you jump, just keep your knees bent and let gravity bring you back to the ground and try to land as soft as you can. This helps because yes, it keeps you floaty. Yes, it helps you ollie higher naturally, but it also helps you stop pushing the board away from you. A lot of times when it's turning or issues like that are happening, you're just pushing your front foot there, right? You're just pushing the board around with your front foot. Where if you just wait and float over it, you're not really gonna be pushing that thing to like Narnia or anything like that. The second thing that it helps with is once you get used to just staying right here, you kind of get used to living like within your body, right? This doesn't feel good. Nobody likes skating like this. But if you're in the air like this, kind of no matter what, you can learn how to adjust the board underneath you. You can make smaller, softer adjustments because it's not paired with searching for the ground. So let gravity do the work of getting you up and down, and all you gotta do is stay right here. The softer you are with your legs, the easier time you'll have to land, the safer your ankles will be as you're landing on the board, the easier it is to balance, the lower your center of gravity. All those things remain really nice just by not being in a rush. In the modern age, misinformation has run rampant in the skateboard community, with the recent surge of Russian bots telling everyone to slide their front foot. And let me read you a direct quote from the White House. "Just go faster, bro." Is this really the best information we can be passing along to our children? There's no one-size-fits-all tutorial, and nothing replaces hard work and dedication. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.